So right quick, something I forgot is that you will need to adjust the teeth. What other class do you get to say those words? So many things in this class can be taken out of context. Yes, class, adjust the teeth now. So I need to make a selection of the teeth. I'm going to go ahead and use the quick selection tool. It would be easy if you to accidentally have layer 2 or layer 1 or some other layer that you're working on selected when you do this. So I'm going to select the background layer and click and drag a selection. And one of the things that happens more often than not, just a quick recap of this quick selection tool, is that you more often than not have to make a selection and then kind of go back and forth with it. So if I hold down the Alt key, I can subtract from my selection using this tool. And I can go in and select little bits here and there. More often than not, I'll kind of accidentally overdo it and then have to kind of go back and forth. Just very common that with this tool that you kind of go back and forth. All right, I feel pretty satisfied with my selection. I'm going to go ahead and select Refine Edge. I can come help you in a minute, Alexandra. I'm going to shift the edge in just a little bit and get this selection to where I like it. I'm going to feather the selection quite a bit too, because the kinds of things that we're going to do to this don't require, it's not like I'm dropping out the teeth to drop into another photo. That would require my, I guess, the fidelity of the selection to be very good. But in this case, we're just going to kind of retouch just the teeth a little bit. I don't need this absolute perfect selection. So feathering it and shifting the edge in this case, are going to work pretty well. I also don't need to worry about it too much if my line looks a little jagged when I'm using the quick selection tool or something like that. I'll go ahead and select OK, and feel free to play with any of these settings to get the perfect selection. A radius value might do well, I don't know. When you're satisfied with that, go ahead and click OK, which just slightly alters your selection. From here, I'm going to add a new vibrance layer, adjustment layer. And let me come around and help you guys. So I'm going to pause the video and resume. All right, so what did I do here? Okay, so I've got, ooh, that's weird. So I've got my selection active. And from here, I'm going to create a new vibrance adjustment layer. I think most of you already have done this. I'm going to go ahead and go through the steps. And then I'm going to turn the saturation down. I'll go ahead and do 100, negative 100. Remember, one way to work is to kind of overdo it with your adjustment layers and then to simply reduce the opacity. Maybe I feel like hitting it with negative 100% saturation is a little bit too much. So maybe I'm just going to reduce the opacity a little bit to help it blend together. Now, oops, 3%, probably too little. Maybe 70 or so. And just like always, I'm adjusting the opacity by using what Photoshop calls the scrubby sliders. Whenever you see a value like this, you can always just click the title and drag left and right and adjust that value. I think with just about every time you see that, opacity is the most common. One last quick step with this to help make the teeth look really nice, because right now they look pretty good. Let me zoom out here by pressing Command 0. They look pretty good, but I can make them look a little bit better by creating a levels adjustment layer. So I'm clicking here at the bottom of the layers palette, that little circle. I call it the yin yang. It doesn't actually look like a yin yang, but that's what I call it for some reason. And then, oh, this came up. That probably went with you. And then from here, I'm going to take my top white point slider. Remember that in levels, I have my output levels, and this will kind of make my image darker. I don't want to mess with these unless I want to make things look darker. If you remember with the Instagram photos, these output sliders look pretty amazing when you're working with individual channels like red, green, and blue. You can do some really neat color effects. But when you're working in the overall channels, graying out your whites makes the photo look worse usually. I'm going to go ahead and take it and drag my white value a little bit to the left. I realized that I'm affecting the entire layer. I don't want that. I need to clip it to, I could duplicate the layer mask to the layer above it. An easier way to do it though is to simply clip this layer to the layer beneath it. And you can do so by clicking this button. You can also hold down the Alt key and let me zoom in. Oops, too much zoom. If you hold down the Alt key, you'll notice the cursor will change as I mouse over. Well, it's really tiny. As I mouse between those two layers, I get that little icon and I can click right there. And now that levels adjustment layer, I might reduce that a little bit. I'm going to grab the gray point and brighten it up a little bit. Again, a very common way to work is to overdo it like I've done here and then to simply reduce the opacity. Let's get that opacity back down to something more manageable. And then it's always important to show and hide these layers to make sure that things look natural and normal. Very easy for you to continue working on an image for quite a long time and then be like, oh, this looks perfectly normal. And then you show it to the client. It's like, why do I have 3 eyes? Oh gosh, this happens all the time. Like people get like 3 legs or 5, 6 fingers. Of course they should have 5. I mean, they get 6 fingers. All right. I'm going to proceed to the next part because it's going to be pretty fun. And go ahead and be sure to save what you have open. You can always tell if a document has unsaved changes. It'll have this little star by the file name. So if you see that star, it's just been ingrained into my mind. Whenever I see that star, that is a symbol for me to hit Command S. So make sure you save that to your desktop. Keep in mind that you probably will want to click this little triangle right here when saving your documents. I don't know if I mentioned this. Kind of an annoying quirk of Macs is that they like to hide this by default, giving you this tiny little menu. But I find that having the much larger menu almost always useful. I think on PC it's just always there. But on Mac, much, much more useful. Very annoying that it hides like that. It's just that little triangle. Yeah. Anyway, so save that as your file. I'm not going to save it because I don't need to. Let's open the last one. And I've got some steps that I haven't really covered in any other class, but I wanted to give you some exposure to Camera Raw. Just a few quick things, nothing really major. I'm going to drag mic.cr2. I'm going to drag it to the icon because that's kind of how I like to open files. It will, by default, open in Camera Raw. Keep in mind that Camera Raw is not Photoshop. It's a plugin for Photoshop. It runs kind of on top of Photoshop. Does everybody have that Camera Raw file open? Because I'm going to show you some things that I've never shown you before. And there'll be some things in here that I guess kind of are listed in your homework, but I want to make sure that you know how to do them. Honestly, if you just do them with me, you'll see. I'm going to go ahead and select Auto here, and that will create adjustments for all of these sliders. When you take digital photography, you're going to use Lightroom quite a bit, and you're going to get used to all these sliders, but for now, I think Auto works okay with this. It works just fine. This Auto, so open up the mic.cr2 file. Once you do that, you will see this Auto checkbox. Or, excuse me, Auto, it looks like a hyperlink. It looks like a link on a website. You can select it by default and click Auto. Auto's a pretty good place to start. It doesn't really work very well in Camera Raw, but it's a good place to start. One of the things that Camera Raw does is it has all of these tabs right here. And the tab that we're interested in is the lens corrections tab. It looks, I don't know, it looks kind of weird, but it's this tab right here. So you can just kind of click them until you see it say lens corrections. One of the things that you'll notice about this photo is that the lens has created a bit of bowing. Because I shot this particular photo at the widest angle of the lens, whenever you shoot very wide, like 24 millimeters, you get this sort of fisheye where things kind of bow outwards. And we can really see it up here at the top. I almost moved my drink as the mouse. That would have been bad. This line it's like curving. It's like a McDonald's thing. It's not working right. So what we need to do is we need to correct that. Fortunately, remember we talked a little bit, when we talked about bridge, we talked about metadata. Remember how the metadata in the file stores everything about that photo. It tells you the serial number. It says how fast all the camera settings. If you put your name into the camera, it'll do that. It can geotag. It does all kinds of things. One of the things it does is it stores the focal length, or I guess that's what I should say. It stores the lens, and it stores the amount of zoom I had on that lens when I took this photo. So if I click Enable Profile Corrections, it will automatically select the lens that I had, and as long as I'm using a fairly standard lens, it will automatically have a profile for that lens. That's all I need to do. And if you check and uncheck that box, look at that. It pretty much fixed the bowing. Not 100%, but it's close enough for government work. Let's see, 2 more steps inside of Camera Raw here. Up at the top left, you have all of your tools. I want you to go ahead and select the crop tool and click and drag a crop around me somewhat. We have a bunch of extra pixels here that we don't need. I'm not too concerned with the tiny details of everything going on here. The exact crop that you create, it's up to you. Just kind of crop around me vaguely. That's pretty good. Once you guys have a crop that you're comfortable with, go ahead and hit Enter or Return, and that will be there. By the way, when you crop in Camera Raw is an excellent way of preventing yourself from ever working destructively. It's always going to work non-destructively. If I bring up the crop tool again, there's all my pixels. I haven't deleted any pixels. The next step I would like you guys to do, kind of the last step inside of Camera Raw, hold down the Shift key on your keyboard. And when you hold down that Shift key, notice that at the bottom left here, it says Open Object instead of just Open. Remember that smart objects are containers, and you can put lots of things in those containers. You can put Illustrator files. You can also put Camera Raw files. I'm going to select, by holding down the Shift key, I'm going to open that object, and it's going to open it as a smart object. If I double-click the thumbnail, it's going to open the photo back up in Camera Raw. This is brilliant. I love this. This is good stuff. I'll hit cancel just because I don't need to make any more changes. Now, we're going to explore a lot of these other filters next week. However, there is one in particular I want to cover today, and that is the Liquify Filter. And just to make a quick note, whenever you use filters and turn them in as part of your homework, please, please, please apply them to smart objects. So convert that layer to a smart object first, and then apply the filter. I'll mention this again next week, but in this case, I mean, we already have a smart object, so if you don't apply things as smart objects, or you don't apply your filters to smart objects, it can be very difficult for me to tell what you did. But because it's a smart object, and I'll go ahead and, like, if I'm just gonna, you don't need to do this on your file, but I'll just, I don't know, add noise or something simple. We'll cover some of these filters tomorrow. But see here, I can always double click this, and this will be true of Liquify as well. I can always double click this, and I get that dialog box back. I'm working non-destructively. It's almost like I've got a container, and I've applied this filter on top of it. And it gets its own mask. I'm going to click and drag add noise to the trash can because I don't need it, which will delete that effect. And then back to what we were going to do, which is filter Liquify. The Liquify filter is gobs of fun. So I like to think of this bit of homework as y'all's revenge on me for torturing you inside of Photoshop. Your homework will be to edit me in some way. There are several different tools up here at the left that will, it kind of treats pixels like they're liquid. So if I, by default, I think it's the, what is this? The warp tool. So I can warp the pixels. And I recommend that you make tiny adjustments when you do this. It's easy to like hit it and like really do that. That doesn't look very good. Usually you want to really do very subtle adjustments. I look like Millhouse. Keep in mind that, okay, so one of the things that I've done here, remember the bracket keys? So all of these tools will work like brushes, or at least very similar to brushes. There's also a pressure setting. I highly recommend that you dial down the pressure setting if you want things to look realistic. At 100%, it really hammers whatever kind of motion you create. It will really hit it quite hard. If you lower that pressure setting a little bit, it'll be a little bit less effective. You'll do a little bit at a time as opposed to trying to God. Oh, Maria really should have been here today because I edited her photos. She should have gotten revenge on me. There are lots of other tools in your toolbox. So the Reconstruct tool is kind of, because you don't have a very good undo feature, the Reconstruct tool will take things back a step or backwards to the original, which I am going to do to myself right now. There is also the Pucker and Bloat tool, which do exactly what you think. If you think that that Mike needs more tacos, I'm going to make a bigger brush here and maybe click here and increase the taco area of Mike. Way too many tacos, right? If at any time you want to reset this, you can always hold down the Alt key and click Reset right here. That will reset everything that you've done. It's like starting from scratch. And just like the Bloat tool, you can also shrink things down. I'm gonna reset. Did I reset? Am I that fat? I thought I was skinnier. So I'm going to select that tool, and what I think I'm going to do is kind of shrink this area down a little bit, really get it down here quite a bit. I almost want this to come down to like a single point, like so. From here, I'm going to click OK. I've, in advance, just something for my own, where'd it go? Ah, I've got this genie lamp. Let me merge that down. And I'm going to, I've never found a good way of dragging something into another file, but I'm going to drag this tab off to the left. This is usually how I end up doing it. I'm pretty sure there's a better way and I'm not doing it. But I'm just going to drag it like this. So with the Move tool selected, so I press the V key for the Move tool. And then I'm going to click and drag this object in here. Come on. There it goes. It's showing me I have two different color spaces. That's okay. My thing is way too big, so I'm going to press Command T to shrink it down. And let's see if we can get this to look better. I thought I could do this a little better, but what I'm probably gonna have to do is double click Liquify and go back in here and make it look a little better. So maybe shift some things around. Oh, I hear the chuckles of revenge. Should never have done this. This is a mistake. I'm sorry, we're going to do a different project. So it would take me a little bit of work to get this looking just right. One thing I need to do is I need to hide, let's see, black. Oops. I'm going to make black my foreground color, kind of, oops, do a nice soft brush. Maybe a little bit harder. Ah, that's weird. So I'm going to click around and kind of get this so that I'm kind of getting that to look a little bit more realistic. This would take me a while to get it to look really realistic. I'm just doing this for fun. Come back, Photoshop. Maybe something like that. I don't know. I'd probably blur this a lot more or something. Some kind of smoke effect. But it's starting to look okay. Then maybe Photoshop. Let's see. Let me reset this tool. Always a good idea to reset your tools, by the way. So I grabbed my text tool and I just, if you right-click right here, you can always reset any tool. So let's say this is my photo. So let's say Photoshop Genie, and select the typeface. I guess I should have installed some neat typefaces. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just screwing around at this point. Oh, that was kind of cool. I don't know, probably the wrong typeface for this, but whatever. And then maybe I'm going to convert this to a smart object so I can apply some smart filters. Convert for smart filters. Okay, that's fine. And then I could liquify this layer and have some fun with the type, but I'm going to do something else just because we'll cover this kind of stuff next week. Guess I'll go ahead and stop the recording. That's plenty.